Good evening, everybody. Breaking tonight, President Trump taking direct aim at the corrupt leadership of the FBI. President Trump denouncing the Bureau, saying its handling of the Clinton email investigation is, quote, disgraceful. We'll discuss that and much more here tonight. The president may be understating, in fact, the level of corruption and damage to the Bureau's public standing. We'll have the full report. Also tonight, Congress ramping up efforts to expose the deep state. Senate investigators are set to interview a top Justice Department official whose wife worked for Fusion GPS, the smear merchant behind the discredited Trump dossier, which may have been used for FISA warrants. Our special guest tonight, Congressman Matt Gaetz. He's among a growing number of congressmen who are calling for a second special counsel to investigate political corruption at the highest levels of the Justice Department and FBI. And in the Senate, Republican leaders are moving closer to victory on tax reform and tax cuts. Senators Marco Rubio, Bob Corker, Ron Johnson all now say they will vote yes, solidifying the chances of passage next week. We take all of it up here tonight. Our top story, President Trump escalating his criticism of the FBI after revelations of entrenched political corruption at the highest levels of the Bureau. President Trump today said there is an extraordinary level of public anger toward the FBI for its protection of Hillary Clinton and in pursuing what he called a scam investigation into so-called Russian collusion in order to frustrate President Trump's policy agenda and Mr. Trump's first year in office. Fox News correspondent Kevin Corke with our report.
The President of the United States has your back 100%. I will fight for you, and I will never, ever let you down, ever.
A clear, definitive declaration of support for the FBI and law enforcement today from President Trump speaking to graduates at the Bureau's Academy at Quantico, Virginia.
I have so many friends that are police officers, so many people in the FBI. These are great, great people. These are really heroes for all of us.
Mr. Trump's comments, his first at the training facility since he slammed the agency for apparent bias in the Clinton private email server investigation, as well as the ongoing Russia probe, the latter of which spurred the president to unleash a barrage of tweets, including one less than 2 weeks ago, in which he suggested that the FBI's reputation was in tatters, worst in history. His attorney general wasn't willing to go that far.
Well, I don't share the view that the FBI is not functioning at a high level all over the country. He spoke to them today, the first time a president in 47 years has spoken to the FBI at Quantico, their graduating police academy class.
Speaking at a summit on combating violent crime today, Sessions backed the president's overall message, trying to keep things positive.
There is absolutely no collusion. That has been proven. When you look at the committees, whether it's the Senate or the House, everybody, my worst enemies, they walk out, they say, there is no collusion, but we'll continue to look.
Just over an hour before speaking at Quantico, the president lashed out again at the Russia probe, which has led to 2 unrelated convictions, including that of his former national security advisor, Mike Flynn.
Do you consider a pardon for Michael Flynn? I don't want to talk about pardons for Michael Flynn yet. We'll see what happens. Let's see. I can say this. When you look at what's gone on with the FBI and with the Justice Department, people are very, very angry.
Anger thanks in part to the latest revelation that several agents involved in the Russia investigation appear to some to have a bias against the president, based on numerous text messages, many of which were strongly critical of then-candidate Trump. Lou, no surprise, a standing room only crowd today over at Quantico to hear the president's remarks. And while the audience was mostly law enforcement officers, I should point out that, listen, the vast majority of the folks there were not actually FBI agents. Still, the president was very warmly received, as you probably saw from the pictures. And in fact, there was robust applause on many occasions breaking up the speech, which might be a little counterintuitive considering all the negative hype and buildup before the president made his way down there to the facility. Lou?
But of course, Kevin, the president's negative comments were directed toward the corruption of that bureau at the highest levels. The leadership of that bureau is are the ones that he is questioning, not the workaday agents who are keeping this country safe and enforcing our laws. And with that, Kevin, thanks so much. Kevin Cork. Our first guest tonight says Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation is infected with bias and has introduced a resolution to remove Mueller. Joining me now, Congressman Matt Gaetz. He serves on a number of key committees, including Judiciary, Budget, and Armed Services. Congressman, good to have you with us. This is quite an evening, I think, as Kevin Cork just reported. The president giving his full support to the folks graduating at Quantico, the FBI Academy, and we now know that so much of what is happening at the top levels of the FBI is absolutely disgraceful, as the president put it.
Well, and you've exactly created the appropriate distinction, Lou, between the heroic agents of the FBI who put their lives on the line each and every day to protect Americans and some of the corrupt senior leadership that we see in the Mueller probe at the FBI and at the Department of Justice. This bias is like an infection. It's like an incurable cancer that's inoperable, and we've got to end this Mueller probe. From the Department of Justice, where you see Bruce Orr, a senior official, having his wife employed by Fusion GPS, the company, taking money from the DNC to go and give to Russians to discredit the president, to the FBI, where you've got people like Peter Strzok sending text messages to his mistress that he hates the president and that he's the insurance policy and he has all kinds of ways he's going to save the country, to the Mueller probe itself, where you've got people like Andrew Weissman, who attended the Hillary Clinton, non-victory party, I should say. I mean, goodness gracious, we've got a lot of talented federal prosecutors. You'd think Robert Mueller wouldn't have to go find one who was at Hillary Clinton's election night party. It shows that Mueller was either picking people because of their bias, or he simply had reckless disregard for the fact that he has assembled, like the governing board of directors of the Never Trump movement, to persecute our president.
Well, Peter Strzok, to his credit, was removed from the special counsel's office, but put in the HR department, for crying out loud, apparently to decide on who would be hired at Justice, brought in for other prosecutorial jobs, investigators. I mean, it is an awful, awful scene that we witness now before our very eyes each day. That is the leadership. The leadership of the Justice Department is a damn disaster, and the president has been saying this. And now, as he almost concludes a year as our president, we're seeing that everything he was saying was exactly right.
Well, you're totally correct. And the real question, Lou, is where in the world is Attorney General Jeff Sessions on all of these critical issues? We continue to see more and more evidence of this bias. And it's not just evidence of people's personal beliefs. Peter Strzok and his mistress were making a plan, talking about actual plans to disrupt this presidency. And the Attorney General needs to step up and fire Robert Mueller as a consequence of these damning revelations. And I wish he'd do it.
May I question just a little more closely what you said? This is in the case of Orr, his wife working for Fusion GPS. These aren't people planning to do anything. These are people who said they were going to do it, particularly as between when it comes to Bruce Orr at the top of the Justice Department, and it comes to Strzok and in his illegitimate affair with Lisa Page. They were actually doing things. And on 2 occasions, we have tweets in which they absolutely manifest their intent. And we know that in the case of Strzok, he was involved in the email investigation. He was involved in the deposition, the testimony of Hillary Clinton and her top aides. He was involved in the immunity. This is an agent who had full reign over the outcome and acted, in my judgment, absolutely corruptly. No planning, no anything else. He did it.
Well, you're right, and that's why we need Peter Strzok, we need his mistress, we need Bruce and Nellie Orr in for depositions, sworn deposition testimony before the Judiciary Committee, so that we can find out what damage they did to our democracy and to our country. I'm frustrated because Jeff Sessions and Attorney General Rod Rosenstein won't answer questions about whether or not Strzok was the very individual who signed affidavits authorizing the Fusion GPS dossier to be used as a basis for FISA court warrants to spy on Americans. This is a rotten guy, and he did rotten things.
Yeah, Congressman, you're not going to like what I'm going to say next. But I've seen congressional investigations throughout the 8 years of the Obama administration, and not one of them were worth a damn. They didn't produce any change, any different outcome. We have a record of some things. We've got 10 committee hearings. We get 8 years of stonewalling. Go to the White House and tell the president what you want, you and your committee, and ask the president to tell the Justice Department, the Attorney General, and his new FBI director to turn over whatever it is you need. Because this is oversight, and you just got stonewalled again this past week it's terrible. You've got Rod Rosenstein not giving you what you're asking for, and you have oversight over them.
We do, and I'm not doing my job for my constituents if the committee I serve on doesn't issue subpoenas and get this information. But here's where our investigation so far has had an impact, Lou. Just today, Harvard University released a poll showing that a majority of Americans now believe that the Mueller probe is in fact biased. And so as we make the case to the American people, we are proving that this is a rotten deal. And I'm hoping that pressure from the public, pressure from the Congress and from the president will get the Attorney General to do his job, fire Robert Mueller, and acknowledge this for the witch hunt that is baseless, and that's certainly where we stand.
And I concede your effectiveness in that regard, and I certainly concede to the House Intelligence Committee its great effectiveness in the use of its investigators to produce, for the first time, a real understanding of what's going on the part of the Justice Department. But I would implore you to go to the White House, to the president, and to get clearance from him, to get him to ask, to order the Attorney General to do what the hell is the right thing, and that is to turn it all over. Congressman, we thank you for everything you're doing, you and your committee. Right now, we are at a place that we would not have been, certainly. But I think it's time to think about who should be put in jail for dishonoring their oath of office, for violating our Constitution and subverting this president and subverting this government. Congressman, thanks so much. Matt Gaetz, appreciate it.
Thank you, Lou.
We're coming right back. There's a lot more straight ahead. Stay with us. President Trump slamming the FBI for its disgraceful handling of the Clinton email investigation.
When you look at what they did with respect to the Hillary Clinton investigation, it was rigged.
We'll take up corruption at the top levels of the Department of Justice here next. And a wave of Republican senators now say they'll vote yes for President Trump's historic tax cuts. Will the remaining GOP holdouts come to their senses ahead of next week's critical vote? We'll have a full report for you straight ahead. Reform is getting closer. Tax cuts getting closer. Republicans tonight releasing the final text of their tax reform legislation ahead of a vote to be taken as early as next Tuesday. Fox News senior producer for Capitol Hill, Chad Pergram, live on Capitol Hill with the latest for us. Good evening, Chad. It looks like they're getting this done.
Well, it seems like it's a fait accompli. We knew that in the House of Representatives. They seem to have the votes, and they have set it up so they're going to have a vote on Tuesday. And then it goes to the Senate. There's a little more of a question. They'll start debate on Tuesday and probably try to finish this on Wednesday. The reason we think that this is a fait accompli is that we got news this afternoon from Bob Corker, the Republican senator from Tennessee. You might remember a couple of weeks ago he was the only Republican no on the bill. And he said at the time, I will not vote for any bill that could contribute even a penny to the deficit. even in his statement today saying he was going to be a yes, he said, this still may explode the deficit. The Republicans will concede that this could add $1.5 trillion in deficit spending, but he says this is a generational opportunity. I know you've been a naysayer about House Speaker Paul Ryan. He indicated tonight that this is getting done. He said this is on a glide path, and they're going to finish this sometime next week. I would keep in mind who the fence setters are. You have Susan Collins of Maine, you have Mike Lee of Utah, you have Jeff Flake of Arizona. All of them voted yes last time. This is a little bit of a different bill, but they should try to move this through the Senate next Wednesday. You say I'm a naysayer on Paul Ryan. I'm an extraordinarily vigorous naysayer on the man's talent and ability to produce and move legislation. It does look like this time he may get there. Mitch McConnell as well. And I know that we're going to start hearing from you and our folks on Capitol Hill about the health of both Thad Cochran, Senator Cochran, and Senator John McCain. What do we know tonight? Well, I communicated with Cochran's office this afternoon. He had a minor procedure. He had a lesion, a melanoma removed from his nose. He has not been voting the past week or so here. I am told that he should be back and he will be voting yes. John McCain remains up in the air. He has not been voting this week. Lindsey Graham, the Republican senator from South Carolina, who's one of his best friends, had not spoken with him when we asked Graham a couple of days ago. We thought we might get some more information about Senator McCain's health right now. Everybody we talk to tells us that they say, hey, we expect him to be here. But if he's not, and if the vote holds the way it is, especially with Bob Corker being a yes, you could have 99 senators and they pass the bill 50-49. I should point out that Vice President Pence postponed his trip to the Middle East to say he could preside over the vote. It's unclear if he might be needed to break a tie vote. Right now it's going the way of the Republicans and the passage of tax reform, historic tax reform. Chad Pergram, as always, thanks for keeping us up to date. Be sure to vote in our poll tonight. Do you think we should be focused on making the FBI smaller and far more transparent rather than leaving it cumbersome and so corrupt at the top? Cast your vote on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. We'd like to hear from you. Follow me on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Like me on Facebook. Follow me on Instagram at Lou Dobbs Tonight. On Wall Street, a record-breaking day for stocks. The Dow up 143 points. The S&P up 24. The Nasdaq up 80. And by the way, all three indexes are tonight at all-time record highs. Volume on the big board, heavy trading today, 5.3 billion shares, in part because of the expiration of options and futures. For the week, the Dow and Nasdaq up nearly 1.5%. The S&P, weekly gains there of nearly 1%. A reminder to listen to my reports 3 times a day, coast to coast, on the Salem Radio Network. Up next, Rhinos Marco Rubio and Bob Corker say they are now yeses on tax cuts. The Senate and the House finally on the verge of delivering those tax cuts to the president. We take it up with Steve Forbes and much more here next. We'll be right back. Vladimir Putin is questioning whether U.S. members of Congress are normal. Speaking during his 4-hour annual presser, the Russian president railed against U.S. lawmakers for putting his country on the same shelf as North Korea and Iran, while at the same time demanding President Trump work with Russia to rein in those same countries' nuclear ambitions. Joining me now, Forbes Media Chairman and Editor-in-Chief, Steve Forbes. Steve, great to have you here.
Good to be here.
I love the question from Putin. Are those people in Congress normal? And if he's listening, I would just like to assure him they are definitely not normal. Do you have a minority view on that?
No, but I don't know how many members of his Duma are normal either.
Well, yeah, but we don't know them, and they are not they're not nearly as relevant as our folks are. This is encouraging. We're sitting here on a Friday night. Everything is moving forward. The text of the bill is coming out. We're moving forward for a Tuesday, perhaps Tuesday morning vote. This is good stuff.
A month ago, this bill was looking pretty bad, both for passage and for the stuff in it. It's not perfect, but they've cleaned a lot of the stuff up on the business side. The rates they're putting in on the personal side are far better than they were 2 or 3 weeks ago. So, yeah, you can smile.
And the president can smile. And I noticed, looking at some faces in the Republican Party of an establishment stripe, they're a little upset because this president appears to be about to get what he needed to produce a foundation for a strong performance through the next 3 years of his first term.
Well, this tax cut hopefully will be the first of many to come, especially after next year's elections if the Republicans do well. And so in terms of the economy, if we get this up to 3.5–4% next year, which is a good chance we will, easily, suddenly when prosperity is there, people get less hyper.
Yeah, I would like to say, Steve, I agree with you that they will, or are likely to. You would think they would. But look what's happened here in the midst of all of this. President Trump has delivered on 3% plus economic growth, a 4% unemployment rate, the highest level of consumer confidence and investor confidence, and the all-time blockbuster first year for any president in the market. And you've still got everyone trying, and at least in the national left-wing media, to ignore prosperity at hand and improving economic circumstance for all Americans.
They'll always be in denial. But for the general public, as this begins to sink in, that the economy really is at a faster pace, that's what counts.
I'll tell you, I think
their votes don't, they have a handful of votes, the media, but there are 150 million other voters out there.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing some evidence of that vote. And I don't know what those of you at home see when you are going for a drive around your communities or your towns, your cities. But I'm seeing far more in the way of Christmas displays, Christmas lights. We've lived in our house for about 33 years. And I've never seen so many, my wife and I have never seen so many displays and so much obvious joy in the moment here as we come into Christmas. So it is, to me, that's a pretty good measure. Animal spirits are breaking out in the best of ways.
Yes, they are. Even in New York this year, there seems to be more colorful displays. And certainly the sidewalks in many parts of the city, you can barely get through.
Right. And so brick and mortar has a shot here. We're just saying a shot, but people are out on those sidewalks. We're also getting a shot at something else. We now know, I think it's safe to say, we now know that we have the most corrupt FBI, the most corrupt Justice Department in our country's history. And I mean, it's been demonstrated. Congress has yet to act. There should be people going to jail right now. It is so clear. The actions of so many who have tried to frustrate the Constitution and a duly elected president.
Well, we've never had anything like this. This is a scandal of unprecedented in American history, where the leadership of the FBI, the Department of Justice, various intelligence agencies actively work to subvert the campaign of a major party presidential candidate.
And his administration.
And never been done like that before. And now it's coming out, and a lot of those people are going to be experiencing wearing thick striped suits.
Yeah, I certainly hope you're right. It is interesting to hear the legal establishment now saying, trying to tamp things down a bit, trying to say, we don't prosecute the previous administration, which is the same thing as saying that there are two sets of laws, rules, and expectations and tradition, one for the wealthy and the powerful and the one for the rest of us. I think that that's going to be really tested this time. I think people want consequence for what has been absolute corruption.
Individuals who break the law, they're not an administration. They are individuals. And if you break the law, you should pay the penalty for it. And you see it with the leaders of the FBI. The agency itself is still strong and good. It's the leadership that was corrupt. The Attorney General of the DOJ was corrupt. And various people in intelligence agencies did things that they should never have done. They all thought it was for a higher purpose.
Michael Morell, and I think we got to give him credit, the acting head of the CIA under the Obama administration, acknowledging that the intelligence community went too far in its actions toward President Trump. That's at least a beginning to get the record right.
And Bill Clinton did not meet with the Attorney General on that runway just by chance to exchange stories about grandchildren.
All right. Steve Forbes, you have a great weekend. Thanks for being here.
You too. Thank you, Lou.
We're coming right back. There's a lot more ahead. Right after these messages, stay with us. President Trump promised to be a law and order president, and he's keeping his promise.
The President of the United States has your back 100%. I will fight for you, and I will never, ever let you down.
We take up President Attorney Lisa Bloom tried to line up cash for women who would then accuse then-candidate Donald Trump of sexual misconduct during the 2016 campaign. According to the reporting of The Hill, Bloom solicited hundreds of thousands of dollars from tabloids and PACs supporting, guess who? Hillary Clinton. Bloom then would take a 33% cut if the women were able to raise a little money as they took their stories to the media. Does that sound like a pay-for-play scheme to you? President Trump has denied all of their allegations, and we're trying to kind of find out exactly the details of what Ms. Bloom and the accusers did. Looks kind of interesting, doesn't it? Joining me now, the editor-in-chief for the Daily Caller News Foundation, author of The Art of the Donald, Christopher Bedford, and Washington Times columnist, Fox Business contributor, Tammy Bruce. Good to have you both here. What do you make of Ms. Bloom and her little, cash to trash?
Well, it's pretty horrible. And what this does, of course, and it's especially for the women who have genuine stories that should be heard. This tells everyone that, well, especially with women, and the argument is that you don't know what a woman's motive is, you don't know what she really wants, or she just wants to get money. Here you have every single element confirming that stereotype, which now harms many women who are seeking real justice. It also, of course, casts a shadow on, I believe, every single accusation against the president. You see this kind of machine.
Well, it's already been litigated. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
All of this has been litigated.
It has.
The public knew about it. The voters knew about it. It went, and now we're watching a desperate set of Dems trying to drive.
Yes, we're seeing every front that the attacks on the president is now, as that scab is pulled back, what's really been behind it. You see the nature and the intention.
What is the scab? I missed the metaphor.
Well, the scab is this thing about we want justice for women, and it's feminism.
Who's
and
we?
Well, Lisa Bloom, the feminist movement.
She wanted money. She wanted cash.
But that's where the scab now has been. The scab has been pulled back. We now realize it's a machine for money and influence, and to harm those with whom they politically oppose. That's the reality of it, not what they presented.
Chris, the reality of it is it looks like cash to trash the president.
It's been a bad few months for Lisa Bloom's reputation, which she likes to put forward. As a feminist attorney, he represents women who are put down. Right now, she's denying this, kind of semi-denying it. She's saying that she was collecting money for these women's security to help them out for the threats that they might face. But she was really just haggling with one over $750,000 and offering to pay the mortgage for another. And not only that, but we've learned in the last about 6 months that Lisa Bloom, feminist attorney, was representing Harvey Weinstein, maybe the biggest rapist in Hollywood, allegedly, I guess I should say. Somebody who allegedly attacked multiple women, and she represented him against these women. So she's undercutting the case of people who are actual victims, doing it politically motivated to hurt the president, and she's also going after women who sound like they are actual victims of a powerful liberal person. It doesn't add up.
Yeah, a lot of it doesn't add up. And the part that doesn't add up here, it seems to me, Tammy, is this all came out during the election. It's been debated, litigated. What is it's talking points, and it's being driven by the left. Mm-hmm. So what?
Well, I think though that this is an example of the nature of what the left is. The fraud that it is.
We have examples.
But I'll tell you, there's so much information. The American people, as often as we can, beyond talking about it, we now have things in writing, whether it's the FBI or in this situation, texts and emails and conversations, for the American people to realize that the left is a fraud, that this is what they do, that this in this dynamic, it's important, I think, on a regular basis to have this kind of proof And the argument that we continually, as I know, having been
This
on the
kind of
left,
proof of what?
this kind of proof of the fraudulent nature of what the left
You're
does.
talking about now with all of the emails, 10,000 of them between Strzok and his lover within the Justice.
Thank God for technology. We're getting it in writing these days about the real nature of what these individuals are doing to our culture and also to politics. And it's an easier conversation to have because we have evidence now.
One of the things, Chris, I get a kick out of is everyone talking about, Flynn. It was easy to get an unmasking through the FISA warrant for him because he would be such a risk. He could be vulnerable to blackmail. And here you have the top, arguably the top counterintelligence agent in Peter Strzok at the Justice Department engaged in 10,000 communications with his lover, Lisa Page. And wouldn't he be far more vulnerable because that's wide open? I mean, the OPM has been an open bowl to hackers. Certainly, the email system at the Justice Department would be even more so.
Yeah, in the last few years have exposed that a lot of the people who we hold up on pedestals as being reliable or at least intelligent make stupid errors. You had General Petraeus, who was brought down by communicating with a mistress through drafts. You had Michael Flynn, who was involved in a meeting with the Turks about kidnapping a U.S. resident and flying him to a Turkish prison. It turned out that St. James Wolsey was in the room, too, bidding on the same contract. You have the FBI here calling the president an idiot. And the problem here with the probe now, with the Mueller probe, is the entire point of a special counsel is that when there's a question about the integrity or the conflicts of interest that could be generated when someone else is supposed to investigate it, you appoint a special counsel to do it instead, to calm the American people down and say, look, we removed this conflict of interest. Right now, Mueller's probe is hopelessly compromised by repeated examples of conflicts of interest that have been dragged out slowly by the Department of Justice or by Congress, and it's hard for the American people to find any reason to trust this probe now.
Yeah, and don't you find it stunning that that Rod Rosenstein doesn't see any need for any concern whatsoever, even as his entire department has been ripped asunder by so many examples of conflicts of interest, of intent to subvert, and by the way, a sordid illicit affair in the midst of all of this. Between two people who are responsible for the integrity of the justice system and indeed the security of the nation.
Yeah, I think, but if I just say, this is, I think, also about the bureaucracy. It is such a habit to defend, a habit that you look at the process that you have, and if the process is good, you've known these individuals.
The deep state, is that what you said?
Well, not beyond the deep state, the deep bureaucracy, that these are like zombies in a way who just kind of go through and it's just by rote. And it doesn't even occur to you that you would actually think that maybe a mistake was made.
You get the last word, Chris.
I agree. You can't trust these guys. And this whole thing with the FBI being not answerable to Congress, which we're seeing played out right here, is kind of a myth. Of course the FBI is answerable to Congress. Of course the FBI is answerable to the president. They're not a government of their own.
I mean, that's the scary thing, Chris. They're really trying to say they're independent of even the oversight committees. And by the way, the committees have been going along with it because it was convenient to their political interests to frustrate this president and the Republican Party and those who would like to see this president succeed.
Exactly right.
Said.
Chris Bedford, Tammy Bruce, thank you both.
Thank you.
It's a new dawning in America, I think we can safely say. Please roll the video. SpaceX accomplishing more historic feats today, launching a used spacecraft atop a used rocket for the first time ever. Both components, that is the launcher and the spacecraft, the Falcon 9 delivering goods to the International Space Station just in time for Christmas. So to everyone, a Merry Christmas. I can't wait for the NORAD Santa Claus to start tracking. That's kind of fun. Up next, Chicago continuing to struggle with gun violence, to say the very least. They're killing, shooting 8 people a day there, one every 3 hours. Yet Democratic Mayor Rahm Emanuel has focused on declaring the city to be a sanctuary city and a Trump-free zone. I can't tell you how cute this fella is. I can tell you how desperate that city is for leadership. So desperate, one of their leaders is turning to the UN for help. For crying out loud. They're out of control. We'll have a full report here for you from Chicago, of course, next. And Trump weighing in on the violence in Chicago. The left-wing led city has some of the toughest gun laws in this country, but has had nearly 3,500 shootings so far this year. Fox News correspondent Matt Finn with our report.
When you look at what's going on in Chicago,
President Trump, speaking at the FBI Academy's graduation ceremony, did not hold back when it comes to his anger over Chicago's violent crime.
what the hell is going on in Chicago? What the hell is happening there?
He went on to say a person is shot every 3 hours in Chicago, which police data confirms. 628 people have been murdered in the Windy City so far this year. Last year, a total of 731 people killed, averaging 2 per day. Cook County Commissioner Richard Boykin is calling on the United Nations for relief.
I'm hoping to appeal to the UN to actually come to Chicago and meet with victims of violence and maybe even possibly help out in terms of peacekeeping efforts.
The president's latest attack on Chicago did not specifically mention the city's mayor, Rahm Emanuel. However, the president has feuded with Emanuel over the mayor's defiant stance as a sanctuary city. And Trump has repeatedly called out Emanuel about the city's crime, even warning he'd send in the feds. This year, the city has received more ATF agents. But this week, Emanuel again thumbed his nose at the president.
I think what he's doing is wrong for the direction of the city. It's not how I wanted the election to turn out. And so we've declared Chicago is going to be a Trump-free zone.
Critics say the mayor has been more focused on his sanctuary city status and running for re-election than worrying about the overwhelming number of African Americans being murdered in his city.
And it's really troubling that we have a mayor in Chicago who has demonstrated that black lives don't matter to Rahm Emanuel, black votes matter to Rahm Emanuel.
This year, Mayor Rahm Emanuel and the police superintendent successfully lobbied for a state bill that will crack down on repeat gun offenders. And the city of Chicago is witnessing a drop in crime citywide compared to last year, especially in its most dangerous neighborhood, Englewood. Lou?
Matt, thank you very much. Not much of a drop in crime, however, violent crime. You're running just about 100 behind in terms of shooting murders. I don't think that's what I'd call any kind of improvement for a failed mayor. Rahm Emanuel has got some kind of extraordinary view of his city's fortunes. Up next, President Trump vowing to repeal the Johnson Amendment, but Congress has refused so far to comply. Pastor Robert Jeffress joins us with that and much more. God in the public square. We take that up next.